and welcome to the third episode of the ADHD Unfiltered Podcast. I'm Cherry.
And I am Emma.
We're both co-hosts of the show, and the ADHD Unfiltered Podcast is all around ADHD. ADHD as a mum, but also we'll just basically be discussing our everyday experiences. We'll have different topics every week, and then every now and then we'll also have some special guests, which I'm really excited about.
Me too.
But basically, this is all about keeping it unfiltered, as the name says, but hopefully for you to feel heard and seen, and hopefully for you to take away some of the strategies that we'll also discuss. So when we talk about different topics each week, we'll also talk about our experiences, but also strategies that we've used.
Yes.
And this week's episode is all about people pleasing and rejection sensitive dysphoria. And we'll have
we know that a lot of you experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something a lot of people with ADHD struggle with. So it's a big topic that's often overseen, I find, and not really discussed enough. And we'll have at the end of this episode also a little Q&A that we've asked you on our platforms, and we'll discuss some of the answers, which I'm really excited about.
Yes, we've had some really good responses, so thank you to everyone who took the time to send them in, because it's just lovely to be able to include you into the podcast, because the audience is a huge part of why we're doing this, and hopefully supporting you and supporting us, because some of the things I've had in responses, I'm like, wow, that's actually going to help me. Like, I'm going to use that. So thank you so much to everyone.
Yes, definitely. And so just as a quick summary, rejection sensitive dysphoria is often referred to as RSD. You might have seen us on some of our reels if you follow us. If not, this might be the first time that you hear about it. But rejection sensitive dysphoria is basically an intense reaction, emotional reaction to perceived or real judgment or rejection. So basically, it's an intense fear of being rejected or judged, whether that fear is valid in the sense that there is something that makes you feel like definitely I'm being judged or rejected here, or whether that's just perceived. So there's no real kind of threat as such.
Yes.
But that doesn't make the emotions any less real.
No, I actually would say for me that the perceived idea of rejection, if anything, consumes me more than actual rejection. Because when I've had actual rejection, I can kind of, it's closure. I'm like, okay, well, that's happened. But if I'm over analysing and overthinking and ruminating over something that I've got no evidence for, I don't know how to stop that. And I think that's worse sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. I think I always feel like, and that I think kind of comes back to the thing that people with ADHD are generally pretty good in like kind of crisis situations and emergency situations, because that's where we really kick into gear, and our focus becomes like really, really great for some reason where other people struggle. And if there's some actual rejection or judgment, I feel like I'm almost able to channel that at times. It depends on it, and it depends on the situation. Sometimes I'm just there and I stare and I feel the emotions rising up inside me, and then I smile and nod, despite that someone has just been rude to me. And then I'll go away and think about, oh my God, what's just happened?
Yes.
Yeah. So it really depends.
You need time to process. Yeah. I think well, what blew my mind yesterday when I was looking into this more was that over 70% of people who have ADHD will experience rejection sensitive dysphoria. And the number is actually likely to be much higher now that there's more evidence and research about it. Especially, I mean, if you look at it at the moment, ADHD, the research on it was mainly on 5-year-old boys. It didn't show how it turns up in adults and women and girls. And I think this is why there's such a huge movement at the moment, and people are realizing about rejection sensitive dysphoria, because so many of us are talking about it and our lived experience. I would say that that number is probably closer to, from the way it looks, I would say it's closer to 100%, because I've not met one person with ADHD that has not experienced rejection sensitive dysphoria. And that's scary.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why the numbers are so high is because up until the age of 10, people with ADHD will have heard over more than 20,000 more negative comments compared to neurotypical children. That's a lot of
That's
negative
so
comments and
much.
critics.
That made my whole body get like goosebumps, because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm one of those children, you're one of those
Yeah.
children, and I really work very hard to not make my children feel like that. And it's a hard thing to do, because criticism happens in life, but I just want to shield my children from like any of that. I want them to
Yeah.
grow to be really like happy and healthy people that haven't had other people ruin that for them. And I do think that rejection sensitive dysphoria is a reaction to that. It's a reaction to
Mm-hmm.
hearing so much criticism from such an early age as
Yeah.
well. Although there's
Absolutely.
evidence to suggest that it's actually just part of how the brain is wired,
Yeah.
and it's there from the beginning.
Yeah, that's also very, very possible, definitely, because
Yeah.
and I think that kind of comes back to the thing that RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria, is often kind of almost connected with emotional dysregulation.
Yeah.
And emotional dysregulation also are said to be is said to be experienced by about 70% of people with ADHD. Although again, I also feel like the number is probably much higher.
Much higher.
Yeah. And if you've got emotional dysregulation, basically what happens in your brain is that the area in your brain that is there to kind of regulate your emotions to quote unquote a reasonable response to the situation isn't communicating well with the area that is there for your behaviors and the outlet of those emotions. So basically there's a miscommunication, which means that the area in your brain that's there to be kind of like sort of quotes on reasonable
Yeah.
is almost kind of shut off when you're having emotional dysregulation. So
Yeah.
it's
And
really,
that makes
really, really
sense as
hard.
well. Well, it ties in as well with how we work. We tend to work so well in crisis and really intense situations. And it's almost as if that emotional dysregulation comes into play there, where something awful happens and we're like, okay, what do we need to do? And then
Yeah.
I'll stub my toe on the sofa and I'll fall apart crying over it and be like, genuinely feel like my world has come to an end. And it's such a funny thing how it is literally like the wires just aren't quite wired in the correct way to have a correct response in what society deems as correct, which is hard
Yes.
because sometimes, I do think that there's so much pressure put on humans in general to just behave in a certain way. And I don't think it's realistic at all, especially for people with ADHD and emotional dysregulation.
Absolutely. And I
And
think
bring rejection sensitivity in it. We're not having a great time, guys. To be
no,
honest, it's
exactly.
very hard.
Because then imagine you're having like a real kind of emotional response to something that's just happened that to others seem, over the top. They'll probably be then going like, well, you're just being over dramatic, or you're
Yeah.
putting on a show or whatever. And then that rejection comes in and you're like, oh my God, I'm
Yes.
being full on judged on my
Yeah.
emotions about this real thing. So it's like a cherry on the top, basically.
100%. Like that brings me back like memories of being a little girl. I've been called dramatic since I can remember. I've been called a hypochondriac. I've been called overly sensitive, and it really hurts because in the moment you genuinely feel those emotions so deep that it feels so real and intense for you, and to have that invalidated is just, it really hurts. And I think it really dents someone's confidence in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And you kind of internalize those things, and then and that's where the whole cycle of then masking kind of begins, and you start to feel like an imposter because you're basically masking part of your whole identity, and then the anxiety also obviously then comes with it.
Yes,
I mean,
you feel like you're a fake person.
Yeah, stats are really high as well on anxiety with ADHD, or caused actually by untreated or undiagnosed ADHD.
Yes. I think I'm going to just read out a few of the signs of rejection sensitive dysphoria, because I feel like there's still so many people that don't know it's a thing. And for me, I would say this was the most enlightening realization for me, not just ADHD but this specific, because I was like, that's me, that is me, and I always felt so much shame. So I'll just read out a few so people can kind of think, oh wow, that might be me. So one of them is sudden emotional outbursts following real or perceived criticism of rejection. And I think for me, I think you might be similar, but for me it's an inward reaction. It's not so much outward. It's takes over my whole body and I feel physically sick. I might get like shivers and it takes over and it's like, oh yes. And it's such a horrible feeling.
It's really, really bad. And I think some people might be mistaking that for like anxiety or panic attack. I remember before knowing that RSD was a thing and that I had, that ADHD impacted my entire life, basically, I remember describing the feeling to my therapist and being like, well, it's not an anxiety attack, but it's not a panic attack either. But it basically feels like there's really, really intense feeling that takes over my entire body. I can't think about anything else. And the reason why I know it's not anxiety is because there's not spiraling thoughts of like kind of catastrophizing thoughts. It's more all about the situation where I felt rejected or the fear of being rejected in the future about something that's currently happening, and it makes me have like cold sweats. I'll be shaking. Sometimes I literally just curl up inside because I'll feel really cold, but I'll also sweat and I feel nauseous. And it's an awful, awful, awful feeling that I wouldn't want to wish on anyone else.
Literally, I think it's almost the closest way I can explain it to someone who might not still relate to that is it's like it triggers fight or flight, and it's very much puts me into flight mode where I'm like, I want to run away from everything, and this is the next one is withdrawal from social situations. That is me. My friends know me as this of I will be all over and chatting and really, really chatty, and then I'll just ghost and I will go very hermit mode. Usually when that happens, it's because not them specifically, but something has triggered me, and I go very like inward. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to say what my problems are because I feel like they're silly or I feel like I'll be invalidated. And that's where the negative self-talk and self-thoughts of yourself come in. And it's this spiral of it starts with this physical reaction and then it becomes emotional, and it really impacts self-esteem so much, so much.
Absolutely. And then it very well can also form into anxiety in the long run, because you'll start to feel anxious about getting that sort of response or feeling again, and you want to avoid it at all costs.
Yes, and it prevented me anyway from going to get help. And when I did get help, going back, I was 21 when I got diagnosed with general anxiety. So that at the time I didn't know, I had no idea about ADHD. So I took that diagnosis. I didn't take medication. I went for cognitive behavioral therapy, and it didn't really help. But you've got to find the right type of therapy to help you with this, because it's such a complex thing and it's not something that a lot of therapists really know too much about as well. It will be, just as you said, deemed as anxiety, when that's a total different ball game. And it's
Totally
really
different.
hard to explain it, isn't it, to people that don't or have never felt it or understood. It's such a deep, almost like, the way I can explain it, it's like I feel as though I've almost been taken out of my body a little bit when it happens. Like I kind of go like into protective mode of, whoa, like what do I do? Why has this happened? And negative comments online can really do that to me as well, where I'll see it and instantly it's like this feeling of, oh my gosh, it's happened again. And I think where that comes from for me is it feels as though when someone says something critical, that they are confirming every negative thing I've ever heard or thought about myself. And that is a lot of emotions to go through.
And I think sometimes those kind of negative thoughts and feelings that you have about yourself, they might be simmering underneath the surface, like you don't even know that you have them. And then if someone is saying something negative about you, or you read it in the comments, it suddenly brings it up. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that that's kind of basically how I felt about myself deep down.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's a huge part of it, is it brings up things about yourself that you didn't even know were a problem, or that you thought about yourself. And that can be a really, really unsettling feeling.
Yeah.
And this is why I've had relationship problems throughout my life as well,
Hmm.
and friendship issues. I used to struggle really badly with, back when I was a young teenager, even a child, from about 5 years old to early adulthood. Jealousy was a huge issue with me. And I think it all ties into this rejection sensitivity of, I
Hmm.
was so hard on myself, and I didn't think anyone else seemed to feel like that. And I would be so jealous of people who just seemed to float by and enjoy their life,
Yeah.
because I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I had some toxic relationships. I sometimes wasn't the easiest friend. And I think a lot of us carry a lot of shame about how rejection sensitive dysphoria has affected our lives, and we put the
Hmm.
blame on ourselves a little bit as well.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. I think, yeah, I had a really, really hard time with it in school as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm currently trying to pick up schools for my little one, and it's really bringing back memories from school that
Yeah.
really weren't that pleasant. And I struggled a lot with rejection sensitive dysphoria. I mean, granted, I did end up going through a phase where I was bullied as well, which was
Oh, I'm sorry.
pretty bad. But
Yeah.
basically, just going back to the kind of symptoms of RSD, that kind of comes with it, you'll also automatically therefore kind of develop a low sense of self-worth, like low self-esteem, and
Yeah.
yeah, you just tend to kind of perceive yourself slowly more in a negative light, because you're taking those
Yeah.
sort of perceived or real actual rejections and negative
Yeah.
comments.
It really does. I think it changes who you are. It changes who you are as a person to what you'd naturally be if, like, you never received any criticism. And of course, life is about receiving
Yeah.
criticism. You can't shield that. But I think
No.
for us, it doesn't feel like it's, even if it's constructive, sometimes
Hmm.
it never feels that way to me. It just feels like an attack. And I'm learning
Hmm.
to get better with that.
Hmm.
But it's still something that, I mean, even if my partner will say, oh, you didn't wash this plate very well. That used to be to me, well, I'm not good at anything. I need to run away. This is
Yeah.
awful. Whereas now I'll just be like, no, I didn't. Oh well. Like,
Yeah.
you learn to kind of find these things that help. So that's why I think it's
Absolutely.
important to try and figure, this out for the listeners as well, who might be listening to this and think, that's me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do to help? And I know that you will have some really helpful tips on this as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we just delve in and help ourselves.
Yes, I think we might actually learn a little bit from each other. I
Yes.
the To be honest, I had generalized anxiety disorder with ADHD. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of that anxiety stemmed from fearing to be rejected or judged, even when that was kind of not when I wasn't even aware of that happening.
Yeah.
Because yes, I would start to avoid kind of some situations, etc. But again, I had like a lot of very negative self-talk. And so firstly, I know this might not be accessible to everyone, but if there's a lot of rumination and then also catastrophizing thoughts, I can highly suggest therapy for anxiety with ADHD.
Yeah.
But just for RSD itself, I actually felt the biggest thing was firstly making sure that I'm dealing with any kind of negative feelings that I have about myself, because that negative
Yes.
self-talk, it's very easy. It just kind of slowly swoops in, and then it kind of becomes this pattern in your brain that you go
Yeah.
through. And yeah, so basically talking out loud and then making sure that you change these things is really helpful. But then also a part of that is spending time with yourself. I found
Yes.
incredibly valuable. So, because a lot of the times I realize I'll be seeking outward validation acceptance, etc., when deep down I'm currently struggling with accepting and validating myself.
Yes. And that's where it all starts, is if you
Yeah,
can't do that, you won't be able to listen to other people's validation of yourself and believe it. It all starts from
exactly.
how you feel about yourself. Yeah.
And then if
Has that
anyone
been
else,
helping you quite a lot then in dealing with it?
yes. So, but not just kind of basically spending time with myself. I'll also make sure that I look after myself well. So basically covering all the basics of my own needs. Because if I
Yes.
don't take care of my needs well, then I'll be much more likely to, one, feel emotionally dysregulated, and then two, be much
Yes.
more vulnerable to also fearing rejection.
Yes, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well.
Hmm.
If you aren't meeting the basic needs of sleep, food, hydration, there's no way you're going to get to the top of feeling really good about yourself, because you're not even filling those basic needs. And the hardest thing is sometimes that's actually not an easy thing to do, and it
No,
takes a lot of strength to carry out those basic needs.
absolutely. And I think with ADHD, that's something we often oversee is how much we actually struggle to take care of our basic needs on
Yeah,
a day-to-day basis.
yeah.
And I know this might sound like, no, I don't struggle with that. But truthfully, think about how much water have you had today, for example?
Mm-hmm.
I've
Yeah.
I can say I think I've had one glass of water and a coffee.
Yeah.
Maybe half a glass of
Same.
water.
I've got this, and this helps a lot, but I
Nice.
find I take the tiniest sips and I'm not actually hydrating myself. A lot of the time I'm just going, and I'm thinking, oh, that's gonna make me so hydrated today. And you
Yeah.
think that you're taking care of yourself, but when you actually look at it, you're like, wow,
Hmm.
oh, okay. So it does start
Exactly.
very much from that.
Yes. So really, really working on myself a lot. And
Yeah.
working on truly trying to accept myself and my shortcomings as well. So whenever
Yeah.
something happens where I'd feel or fear judged or rejected, I try to validate my feelings. And I try to like
Yes.
really talk nicely to myself. So as if that was my daughter that it happened to, for example. So let's
Yeah. Yeah.
say, I don't know, I'm running late again, and I fear that the person that will judge me for being late and that they'll think that I'm a
Yeah.
rude person. And I'll then instead be like, right, you've tried everything you could. You're doing really well. It's really hard to be on time. Look, you do struggle with time management and like time blindness. And for that, you're doing your absolute best. And sometimes life gets in the way, and that's okay. And maybe the next time I can revalue that situation and see what I can do differently to make it a little bit easier for me. But
Yeah.
basically, trying to not judge myself in the first place. And then
Yeah.
something that's also really helped me is learning that inherently, or really deep down, we're all very selfish beings. So there's been very interesting studies that have been done where our base status or baseline is to think about ourselves first and at all times.
Yeah.
And I know that that sounds very like, oh, really? But actually, really, when you think about it, even when you're thinking about someone else, you also be thinking about yourself as well.
I suppose it's
And
a
how,
survival instinct, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. And really, if someone is thinking about you, they'll be thinking about you for literally like 2 seconds, maybe
Yeah.
max. And the rest of the
Yeah.
time, they'll go back to themselves and think about themselves. And learning as well that if someone is judging you, they are really just projecting their own feelings about themselves that they deep down have
Yeah.
about themselves onto you. And
Yes.
not just hearing that, but really truly learning about that and realizing that that is true has
Yeah.
made so much difference, the world of a difference. It's probably been the
I
most
feel the
helpful thing
same.
for me.
Me too. That is literally what I was going to say too, is learning, especially being a content creator. Oh my gosh, you have to learn this, because some of the comments I have received over the last year and a half, some of them have almost broke me down.
Yeah.
And learning now, that's nothing about me. They don't know me. They don't know anything
Mm-hmm.
about me. That is a projection of what they are feeling right now. And I'll send
Yeah.
love to them because they aren't feeling great. And that's
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. That's not my problem. And that in itself, like, also thinking, if I wouldn't take advice from them, why should I take criticism? I don't want to. If I won't
Oh my
trust
God,
them to
yes.
give me good advice, they're not going to give me anything of value. So I don't have to take that in, and I don't have to believe
Mm-hmm.
it. And that is a game changer when you have
Yeah.
ruminating thoughts.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then also basically realizing that, so that kind of projection, it's often called, I think, anchoring, where we anchor our own experiences or thoughts and feelings that we have about a specific topic, and we put that onto someone else. So we automatically assume that our feelings, thoughts, and experiences should be the same as another person about that same subject. And if they
Yeah.
don't seem to have the same value, you'll then start to kind of judge and reject, basically. So,
Mm.
and I have kind of experienced that as well within comments, definitely. And I was like, oh,
Yes. Yeah.
I feel like there's something that you haven't quite dealt with yourself. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's it.
yeah, absolutely.
It's I think it, for me, the thing that's helped me quite a lot, and it's not easy to do, but if I'm feeling a particular rejection sensitive dysphoria day about someone that I'm friends with or that I like and respect, and I'm worrying that I've done something, I have learned to just openly talk about it and say, hey, I'm having a day like this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just worried that I might have done something, because we're
Mm-hmm.
intuitive people. A lot of the time we can tell if someone's a bit off. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, it's provided such a healing and positive experience and brought us
Mm-hmm.
closer, because you'll be able to just get what you think and say it out loud and have a conversation. And of course, that's not always possible. There are people
Mm-hmm.
that unfortunately aren't aware enough in themselves to have that. But I think talking it through, especially if it's
Yeah.
someone that you care about, is so important. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when the first like couple of things aren't helping, definitely talk it through, I would
Yeah,
say as
that's
well.
like the final step. When you've done your own work, when you've
Mm-hmm.
watered yourself, you've fed yourself, and you're feeling, I'm still feeling funny, talk
Mm-hmm.
it through.
Yeah.
If you feel close and comfortable with that person,
Yeah.
I can guarantee that they will respect that you've done that rather than ruminate and create friction. I've learned that anyway. I used to
Yeah.
hold it in, and it would just cause really uncomfortable, unnecessary, sometimes conflict as well. And I just
Mm-hmm.
think, no, we don't want to do that. But this is where I think as well is a good place to talk about what the audience have said, how it's
Mm-hmm.
affected
Mm-hmm.
them. And I had some really heartfelt responses. So should we share
Absolutely.
some of those?
Yes. Do you want to share first or me?
You
I've
know
got a
what? I'll let you. You
yeah.
go, because you've got a good one, I know.
I have a couple of really good ones. Just because I could really see myself in those as well, and I feel a lot of other people will too. So I had a message from someone saying, I have a recurring problem with people being rude or outright bullying me, and me trying to laugh it off because I know I'm sensitive and assume I'm the asshole in the moment.
Oh, yes.
And that really hit deep,
Yeah.
because I think with RSD comes obviously then people pleasing. And
Yes.
I realized myself that I'm often afraid to reject someone else because basically I don't want
Oh
them
my
to
gosh,
feel
yes.
rejected, because I know that's an awful feeling. And but it
Yeah.
makes me not set boundaries, and it makes me basically just sometimes almost be a little bit of a doormat for people, because I won't stand up for myself either sometimes.
Mm. It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that when you know how rejection feels, and
Hmm.
then potentially causing that for someone else is that's a really interesting thing that this person's brought to attention, because yeah, it's you almost do become a doormat, which is I'm not naturally that kind of person. I'm quite naturally a fiery soul, but
Yeah,
I found over the
same.
years in my late, like now I'm in my 30s, it's got worse where I'm just like, I thought it was I don't want drama, but actually it's I don't want conflict because I don't want to make anyone else feel bad, and I certainly don't want to make myself feel bad. And
Yeah,
that's a really sad thing, that we're just letting people essentially
I
hurt
know.
us, and because we don't want to hurt someone else. Oh
No, and I'm having that with some very close people in my life that I wouldn't want to get rid of ever, but
yeah.
basically they had hurt me, and I actually tried to make them feel better about hurting me because
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, look, I'm really upset about this, etc. We talked about it. They did apologize, but I felt like it wasn't quite resolved because for me, I'm actually still hurt by everything that had happened. And
Yes.
because I know in myself, I'm still hurt. I want to make everything go back to the situation that it was before, where there's no rejection at all, where there's no tense
Yeah.
feeling. And I want to make everything good again, despite
Yeah.
that it's me who feels hurt still.
It
Despite that
should
it's
be
me who feels
them
hurt,
that's doing that effort.
I'm making the effort. I'm there being like, oh, look, I really hope you didn't, you didn't take it the wrong
Oh
way. And, I love you
yes.
and those sort of things. It's not my partner, by the way, but
No.
no,
No. I
but
get this so
yeah.
much. It's like I had a very similar situation with close people. It'd be obvious if I say, I don't want to make it obvious, but
Yeah.
I had a very similar situation, and I still haven't spoke up about my feelings because I know that it would just end up me feeling bad and me feeling like the one that causes problems because I've spoke out about something. And I
Yeah.
think that actually is such a hurtful thing to carry, isn't it? It really does weigh you down. And that's a whole different level of rejection sensitive dysphoria that I hadn't even really thought about,
Yeah.
actually. That's such an interesting message that person sent, of a different outlook about it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I think we all struggle with that a lot. I
Yeah.
think, the main thing that came up for me was, again, people pleasing. And I've got literally 10 screenshots here of the basically same thing, of people pleasing, and it makes me feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough person. And it disrupts their life. It's self-sabotage. It
Yeah.
causes them to run away from things that could be really good. Someone here has put, I feel like I self-sabotage a lot because I'm anticipating rejection. And that is something, I've done that with work.
Yeah.
Sometimes I won't open an email because I automatically assume that they are going to say something nasty to me. And it's like, why would a work email be rude or nasty? But I will avoid opening emails for a good hour or two sometimes because I'm like, oh, they're going to criticize me.
Yeah.
And that's a form of self-sabotaging, of not taking on work, not
Yeah.
taking on opportunities, because you assume it's going to go wrong, or someone's going to
Yeah.
say something nasty or mean to you.
Absolutely. I actually have that. To be completely true and honest, I have that a lot with like brand partnerships and deals. So where
Me
I'll be
too.
working with a brand who I really, really like because I wouldn't be working with them otherwise, but
Yeah.
then really fearing to post a video talking about the product that I really like because I fear that other people might judge me or reject me or think that I'm lying and not being true.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest trigger, is people
Yeah.
thinking that I'm lying, because I'm
Yes.
an awful liar. I'm an awful liar. Like
Me
I
too.
get
Me
yeah.
too. I don't
I
think we
can't.
can't. We're very authentic people, and we're very heart on our sleeve. We say it how it is, and being misunderstood feels like it makes me want to be sick. Basically,
Yeah,
it's a
same.
horrible feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get
absolutely.
that so much. That is what sent my mental health really bad a few weeks ago was that exact problem that you just spoke about. And it's a difficult thing to speak about, because a lot of people will say, well, you're lucky that you're in that position to have brand deals. And it's like, of course we are. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that we don't have that emotion still. Rejection sensitive dysphoria is a part of us, unfortunately.
I know.
And we will feel it in every aspect. But
I know. I sometimes feel
people...
like... Mm-hmm.
You go. We're trying so hard not to interrupt each other.
Honestly, I feel like we're doing
our little
so
souls.
well. I know.
We really are.
I mean, well, I just forgot what I was going to say.
I'm so sorry. Oh my God. You know what? This is part of this podcast. It's forgetting, interrupting. I'm sorry.
You go first. It probably will come back to me.
Hopefully. I was just going to say, I asked last night of what things help people with rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Love that.
And one person put isolation, which is what we spoke about, keeping their distance just to wait it out. Someone said crying it out and processing by talking and walking, which is something that we've spoke about before.
Yes,
and
movement.
If you don't do that, it just prolongs those emotions and those feelings inside of your brain and your body. So movement, and I know, for instance, when I'm doing the school run, I have to walk 40 minutes. By the time I get home, what was bothering me before I left, I feel so much better because I've got it out of my system, it feels like. But most people said offloading and talking to people, it really helps get it out of my head. And another person said that their family helps them cope because they're able to talk it through. And now that their family understands, they can kind of say, hey, this is what's happening.
Love that.
I know. And I think exposure therapy, someone said, I forced myself to do activities that trigger RSD, and I eventually got desensitized. And I think that if you are in the place to do that, then you do that. But I will just say with caution to people that if you are particularly struggling, that's not the way to start. That's like when you've done the feeding, your watering, and exactly. Because that could be quite damaging if you're not prepared.
Absolutely. And something that I did is to stop doing things to prevent future perceived rejection or future actual rejection. That was like a big thing, but definitely when you're further on in the process, try
you've
and
got to
see
be aware.
Exactly. What are you doing or what are you not doing to prevent or try to prevent rejection? And then basically do those things that you stop doing, or don't do those things that basically try to help you avoid rejection. So stop doing some things and start doing other things. Absolutely. But again, that's not something to do. That's not something to do when you're
slogan.
when you're really struggling in the moment. It's further on, but it can make you feel really empowered because you'll realize actually there's no judgment. Most of the time.
That's so true. I've been doing, funny enough, with desensitization, I've been doing it with spiders, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I feel like we had one I called him Dennis. I don't know why I do that, but he was up there last night and I was okay with it. And then he moved and I was like, mate, okay, I've let you stay there and now you've invaded that privacy. So we're not on good terms.
No.
But I feel like this is a good place to wrap up today. And I hope that this has been helpful for people, because for me, I've genuinely, you know, when you get shivers when you're really excited about something, this conversation has really made me feel better and given me like some things to think about, and I hope that has done that for the audience. Next episode we've got quite an exciting thing planned with a guest, so I'm not going to say who, but I will give a little clue. She's Canadian. I hope if they don't guess from that, she's, you know, little snippet, just teasing. So that's exciting. It's going to be talking about addiction and ADHD and how prevalent that is. So don't forget to tune in for that. That'll be a good one.
Next Sunday. Bye.
It's every Sunday, and we're really, I mean, considering we have ADHD, we are smashing keeping on schedule so far. Touch wood, because let's not ruin it for ourselves.
All right. Well,
but yeah.
End today's session. Thank you so much for tuning in, for listening. And again, we hope you were able to take some things away and to make you feel better as well, hopefully.
Yes. And I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.
Yes.
Bye-bye.